Hello and welcome to another episode of the Straight Talk podcast. I've got a special guest for us. His name is Pete Mohr. Pete understands business, is a lifelong multipreneur. He's owned and operated businesses in the service sector as well as retail since 1994. He has owned franchises, started his own businesses, and bought and sold some along the way as well. Pete, welcome, man.
Thanks so much for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here with you.
Yeah, you've got a very, very extensive, interesting, diverse background, diverse in a good sense. But I would like you to kind of give us a backstory, 30 seconds or less, high level, a little bit about, there's so much about you. So a little bit about you.
Yeah, well, thanks so much for having me here. And, I've spent my life as an entrepreneur. I've never really worked for somebody else for about 6 months in my entire career, and always have had my own businesses. Like you said, started up with a small franchise business and built that and grew that, bought another business, 10 times it, sold it, became a business broker. So I helped people buy and sell businesses, which is how I found a business that I still own 12 years ago, that we bought 12 years ago, called Shootopia. And we're retailers. We own a couple of footwear stores. And I love talking business with people. And so that's why I spend most of my time these days actually coaching other entrepreneurs through what I call their frustrations and creating freedoms through what I do with simplifying entrepreneurship and my coaching business there.
Very nice. Now, one question I have, that comes up, you mentioned you've owned multiple businesses. Yeah. I think you currently own several businesses.
Yeah.
How are you able to run more than one business at a time? Because running one is a full-time job. You've got several on the pot. How do you do that?
Yeah, it's something I've done almost my entire career, is have multiple businesses. And I think entrepreneurs often are, if you ever heard of the Kolbe system, and the Kolbe system is a sort of a personality type profile. But if you're a quick start, which a lot of entrepreneurs are, which basically means that you have lots of ideas and lots of stuff going on. For me, once I got stuff up and rolling, I've always been interested in getting the next thing up and rolling, whether that's within the business that I own or whether it's looking at a different business and a different structure, because I've created this framework, Salim, and it's really around what I call the 5 Ps. And once we have everything aligned within those 5 Ps, it gives you this idea and sort of framework that allows you the freedom to go and do something else within your businesses, what I call the love it or leave it zone. So you're leaving the stuff that you don't love in that business and really working on the stuff that you absolutely love, and having other people underneath you that are working with you as part of your team to deliver your promise. And that's the first P. So I'll give you the 5 Ps. The 5 Ps essentially are your promise, and really truly knowing what that is, and then aligning your product, or if you're a service-based business, your services, and your process and your people, so that you can have the right amount of profit. And when we have the right amount of profit, then we can start determining what it is that we want to do with that profit. And often it's different for everybody. Some people want to, take it and just continue to grow it in their pool or reinvest it back into their business. Other people will say, you know what, I'm going to split the risk and invest in something else, buy a property, buy a different business, all of these different things. And once you get your business rolling to that point through the alignment of those first 4, then you have the choice and the freedom to do what you want with that profit. And, a lot of times for me along the way, it's been to hire the right people to run that business so that I can go and start the next one or buy the next one or grow the next one or whatever the case is. So that's really how it's aligned for me to be a multipreneur and have different businesses on the go at the same time.
Got it. Can you help me unpack the 5 Ps again, please?
Yeah, for sure. So it all starts with the right promise. And the promise
to the client, to the customer.
Yeah. So the promise really is understanding your promise, and this has changed for a lot of people over the last few years. And when we look at the promise, what is the promise that you're delivering? So understanding what the problem that they have, your client, what problem are you solving? How are you uniquely solving it, different than anybody else, so that they can live a better life? And, I use this term a lot. Everybody buys a better life. So when you can show them how using your service through your process is better than using someone else and adds more value to their life and whatever it is they're looking for, then that's really where it becomes compelling for them to buy your services or products over someone else's. So really, the alignment of the promise is this: understand the problem. What is your unique set different than anyone else, so that they can have a better life? And there's a big framework around that. And even in, for accountants and all that sort of stuff, what you're doing, depending on the business that you run, if you're a tax preparation business or the different alignments of accounting, understanding that. But how do people want it delivered? How do they want to give you their information? What is the meeting structure around that? What are they looking for? Things have changed, and people want to be hand in their digital files. They want to get back whatever they want to get back. They want to have certain meetings that maybe they didn't have before. And so all of these things, no matter if you've been doing something for a very long time and you think it hasn't changed, well, it probably has. And those are the kind of things you have to be on top of, or else the competitors around you will notice those changes and make changes to their business that are going to surpass yours and offer different values that the clients are wanting. So it's really the understanding of the promise and making sure that it's right in cue with what it is you deliver.
Right.
And then
awesome. Yeah,
then
that's great. So first piece, promise.
Yeah.
And I loved how you clarified and the layers within promise. It's not the product, the widget we are selling, but all the underlying benefits and how it's delivered, the unique value prop is incorporated within it. So there's several aspects of it within that. So that's really awesome. So we start off with the promise to the customer, to the prospective customer, client, patient, and so forth. Right. So we start with the first P. What's our second P?
It's the product or service. So from that side of things, we've been doing whatever we're doing. A lot of listeners here probably have been in business for a while. I heard on one of your podcasts that I think you just celebrated your 27th year in tax preparation. And like me, I've been in business since 1994. But a lot of these things we've been doing the same way for a long time. And so if you have been in your business for a while, just because you've had a product or a service that you've had for a very long time doesn't mean that you need to continue to do it, or it doesn't mean that you're clients actually find value in it anymore. It's an interesting thing. A lot of people haven't updated some of those things because it's the way they always did it. And you know what? Clients maybe just don't want that anymore. I'll flip it back into our shoe stores. We used to sell kids footwear. Well, when we looked at the profitability, which is one of the P's, and we looked at all of the other things around kids footwear and the shelf space that we had in our stores dedicated to that, and the time and the inventory and the turn ratios and all these other things, we dug down into the dashboard of that particular segment of our business. It wasn't worth us having anymore. It didn't make sense. It didn't structure. We could bring in other things into the store that were going to be more profitable, easier to use, more in alignment with the clients that were actually coming into our store. So we got rid of kids' footwear entirely and have all that more space in our room and all are in our stores and much more profitable because we got rid of it. And what are those things within your business that you're continuing to do because you've always done them and you haven't actually taken a deep dive down into the business, looked at the statistics, looked at the time spent, looked at the people involved, and actually asked your client, is this still of value to you anymore? It's an interesting thing. A lot of people don't dig back into that. They just assume And we all know what the word assume stands for, make an ass of you and me. Well, we can't just assume that they want things that we've always delivered in the past, or they want them in the same way. So I encourage people to look at sort of use the 80-20 rule, parse off 10% of your products that really, when you dig down into it, are just no longer value. That 80%, you want to assess it, address it, and advance it. So you want to make it either cheaper, faster, quicker, easier to access, understand that how it can develop. And then the next 10%, you're always looking at, from the owner's perspective, what's new and coming down the pipeline? And what do I think my clients might want down the future that we're going to start needing to explore now? And maybe test a little bit and, go to your clients and say, hey, listen, is this something of interest to you? Maybe there'll be a test for you in this season or in this, year, so that you can see if it's going to actually become one of the areas of focus for you down the road.
Love that. So promise, product. What's our third P?
Process. And, process is a big one. Everybody has process in their business, but when it sort of falls apart is when it's not actually written, recorded, or recorded either video wise or audio wise, or it doesn't have a process behind it so that people can access it and understand it. And if all the process, and I work with a lot of small business owners that are sort of, say, doing $1 to $10 million worth of business. And a lot of times in that zone, still a lot of the process happens to be in their heads, where a lot of the major decisions and process is there, and it's not out onto a manual or into recorded video or into those sort of things. So we really need to dig back into all of the processes. What are they? Your hiring, your firing, how you actually lay out. When we talked about your promise, those things that are uniquely different than everybody else, well, what is the process to those things? How does it lay out? Is everybody following them? And all of that sort of stuff is so crucial. And often when we look at creating a turnkey business so that you can actually remove yourself as the leader and move on to some other areas or start a new business or start a different area of your business, it's not until these processes are really down and in place that we can actually remove ourselves from the decision making within our businesses. And that's the most important piece. Decisions should be made always at the lowest possible level of every organization. Decisions should always be made at the lowest possible level of every organization, because if they aren't, then people above in the organizational structure are being pulled down into decisions that they don't need to be involved in. And that's when, if process is right, you don't need to be involved in those because they know what to do. They are aligned with the promise. They are aligned with the product, and it just happens automatically for the people whenever they have to deal with any of those things within process. So, processes are never perfect, but we're always trying to work on them and perfect them so that we don't have to be involved in decisions at many different levels within the business, and that things happen just sort of like clockwork.
Yeah, love that. That's awesome. Cool. What's our next P?
The next one is people. And that's often the tough one for most business owners. And I subdivide people into 3 different categories, Salim. And, one is your ideal client. And I'm sure, we've talked about that in the past, and everybody kind of gets the idea of who is your ideal client. But it's also interesting to know who is, the one that you want to repel. So we need to understand who we want to attract, but we also need to work just as hard at repelling the ones we don't want. The other one is your ideal teammate. Who do you want on your team? And you can think of this in the same framework, right? The same framework. Who's your best ever employee? Who's your best ever, team member, manager, all of those things? Write down the list, put a vertical line down the sheet of paper on the left side, all of the things that you loved about, Joan Smith, that she was the best ever manager we ever had, or best ever salesperson, or best ever accountant, or whatever the case is, best ever. All of those characteristics, lay them all out. And then there's also Billy Doe, and Billy was the worst ever. So what's all of those things down the right hand side, the worst ever. And when you're looking for your next team member, whether it's through your interview process, whether it's through the job application, whether it's through a social media post, whether, any of these things, you are trying to align for the best ever, and you're trying to repel for the worst ever, because it's just as good to take somebody out of the equation at the very beginning. So you want to make sure it's like, we are not looking for this. We are looking for this. And, it's tough. Hiring good people right now is a tough thing, and everybody's going through it in every industry. But when you lay out the communication in clear and concise manner, exactly what it is you're looking for and exactly what it is you aren't looking for, either through, like I said, the job offers, or through the series of interviews when you're asking the right questions, aligning with that sort of stuff, and you can use examples and all of that sort of thing. Very important piece. And the third one, which I also do, and I like to framework it in saying best ever and worst ever, is who are the outsourced suppliers that help deliver your promise? Could be a marketing company, could be, a VA, could be just people you pull in at different times of the year, could be a supplier, could, all of these different people that help deliver your promise to your client. Who's the best ever? Who's the worst ever? How can you align to get more of the best client wholesalers and suppliers? And how can you repel and get out of working with the ones that aren't working for you or your customers? So those are the three levels of people that I like to sort of wrap around and look at and go through, so that we can really try and magnify the importance of all of those good things, and also get rid of the ones that aren't working.
Yeah. Was that our fifth P?
Yes. Yeah. And it's
okay,
the profit.
Cool.
It's the profit.
And then the fifth is profit. Okay, yeah. Got it.
And we chatted a little bit about what the profit can do at the beginning, because it gives you your freedom. So a lot of these things are the frustrations of getting through all of this. But once you get some of those things, those three in the middle in particular, your product or service aligned, your process aligned, and your people aligned, then you can start looking at, how am I honing my profit? And when I look at the profit's not only cash dollars. Profit to the entrepreneur, to the business owner, is their freedom. And how you choose and what you choose to use the profit toward will give you your different levels of freedom. And I think, most business owners, they've been at it for a while. They kind of look back and they're saying, hey, I had this idea, when I got into business, whatever, 5, 10, 15, 30 years ago, that I was going to have this kind of life. And maybe I'm not living it. Maybe I have more money now, but maybe I'm still not living some of those freedoms. So understanding what those freedoms are incredibly important. For me, they revolve around my health, my wealth, my relationships, my purpose. What else do I want to do within the business? Those kind of questions help you align my free time. How do I want to align my free time? So that's a question, is like, do you even have any free time as a business owner, is a big question too, right? And who are you spending it with? And is it who you want to spend it with? And aligning all of that is very hard to do if you don't have the right amount of profit, because you just get sucked back into your business continuously and trying to drive it so that you can build the right amount of profit. And, making all those decisions and doing all that stuff and being stuck in the wheel of what is your business, instead of pulling yourself out of the wheel so that things are happening automatically and in a turnkey fashion that allow you your freedoms that you deserve as a business owner.
Love your framework. And I can see that's, a strong reason how you've created a turnkey business for yourself, and you're helping others do that. This has been so informative. And as we get closer to finishing up in the next few minutes, Pete, what are some things you feel entrepreneurs need to hear at the time that we are going through in business now? 2 or 3 things that are important, that are relevant, that they need to hear from you.
Well, for me, I think the big thing that happens here is entrepreneurs, business owners need to provide clarity, everybody within their sphere of influence. So when we look at that people portion, you need to be very clear about what it is you want out of your wholesalers so that they can help deliver that, right? And your suppliers and all those other people that are helping you. You need to be very clear with your clients on what you can deliver. You need to be very clear with your team on what the expectations are. There are accountabilities, right? And if there's clarity that's missing in any of those areas, that's what you need to work on. And then you need to communicate it. And the idea around, if it's only in your head and it's not communicated throughout everybody that needs to know, then that's a problem. It's a problem. And so that's why we start with the promise, Salim, because the biggest thing is everybody needs to know what it is and why it is we're in operation and what we're trying to do, so that decisions can always be made based with that promise in mind, so that then we can communicate and be held accountable. And, people like accountability, by the way. It's really, entrepreneurs are often saying, well, I'm involved in all these decisions, but most people that work for you actually want to be accountable. They're not skirting accountability. They actually want it. And it's up to you as the business owners to lay it out and help them have accountability within the organization. And that's a big piece too, I think, Salim, is that most business owners out there find it hard to actually hand off accountability within their business and sort of let it happen. And from that perspective, the sooner you do that, the sooner you can free yourself from some of these frustrations within your business. Have you ever asked a question? Have you ever asked yourself the question, why don't they just get this done? Like, we've talked about this before. Why don't they just understand how to do this now? They've been here for a while. Well, it's probably actually not their fault. It's probably your fault as the business owner, because you haven't actually given them the accountability and the ability without your involvement.
Yeah, and earlier you mentioned, people is one of the tougher challenges that businesses have. And as an entrepreneur, the E-myth, you started off as a technician and you suddenly handed a business and it's like, okay, I'm now, an entrepreneur, or I'm a manager, and you've got two different hats, and you don't have the skill set to really perform those, and really communication and clarity and that. And I think, that's a big challenge. How does one overcome that?
Well, typically it's through starting with this sort of aligning these things that we've talked about, so that you have a benchmark to work from. And then you set up essentially a meeting structure, so that you're always, repetition is the mother of skill, right? And so you're always repeating, these are the expectations. This is the process. So, when you look at process, if something's fallen down in process, you go back to your manual and you say, hey, listen, you're accountable for this, and this is the process, and let's go through it again for the training, exercises. That's that communication piece, right? So we're either communicating one-on-one, we're communicating in a team setting, and there's so many easy ways to communicate these days, with Zoom, with Loom, with all of these different things, with voice apps, with texting. There's no excuse for communication to fall down within a business. And if you're finding that things are weird, you probably have to look at the communication and meeting structure of your business, so that everything is being explained and brought out, so that accountability comes into your business and is expected all the time. And from that's when freedom starts to come. And it's like, oh, now I want more. It's like, it becomes addictive. It's like, oh, I don't have to do that anymore. I don't have to buy, I don't have to purchase anymore, or I don't have to do accounts receivable anymore. Or, once you start laying that off, it's like, ooh, things are good. And let's set the next one up. But you can't do it without actually having the right process and people in place, or else then it becomes a nightmare.
Yeah. What's the first thing that people can do? Folks that have not been meeting with their team on a regular basis, what's a small step somebody can do to move in the direction of communication?
Really, I can tell you what we do. We have at my businesses, we basically have a meeting framework that's expected, and we hold everybody accountable to. And this is how it works. We meet once a month as a management team for a half day. We used to meet once a quarter for a full day, but now we've gone back to once a month for a half day, just to be a little bit more consistent. And then during that, we're aligning everything. We're going back and we're saying, what's our quarterly priorities? What's our yearly priorities? We're repeating, like repetition is the mother of skill, right? We're repeating what it is we've aligned our goals for and everything. And then, so that's our monthly. And then we meet weekly for an hour. And sometimes that's on Zoom, sometimes it's in person, but that same management team meets for an hour just to go back what we talked about at our monthly, make sure we're in alignment, make sure that, where are we sitting? Let's look at our dashboard. Let's go through the stuff we need to alter for the rest of the month. And then what we do on a daily basis is we use a voice app called Voxer, which I really like, Voxer. And we literally just vox to each other our 3 priorities for the day. So my team, my management team, I hear every morning when they come into work, what are my 3 priorities for the day? And did you accomplish your 3 from yesterday? So we're always in full communication as to what everybody on the team's working in and and I don't hear from people at the lower levels. I'm hearing from my management team, and they've got communication structures that are in so that they're hearing from their team as well. And so that's this idea of being in full communication within the accountability chart, so that, everybody's got a different way of doing it. But if you're not doing anything, you don't have to lay it out with all of those. Maybe just start with a half an hour meeting once a week and lay out, go through the 5 Ps and say, what do we need to change? What's working well and what isn't? That's a good place to start.
That's awesome, man. Good stuff. Wow, this time really flew by.
Yeah.
You've got so much to share with us. Really appreciate it, Pete.
My pleasure.
What's the best way for someone to reach out to you? What's your accessibility to them?
Yeah. So the best way to catch me is just go to simplifyingentrepreneurship.com. I know it's a long one, but that's the name of my business, simplifyingentrepreneurship.com. And you'll see everything about me, or you can hook up on LinkedIn or anywhere else, Pete Mohr, Mohr, and happy to have a connection. I've got a great assessment on my site right now, which takes about 10 or so minutes to fill out. And it's just you take the assessment. And when you take that assessment, it'll spit you back about a 40-page PDF document and sort of green light and red light all of the things that you're doing really well within your business and the things that you need to work on in your business. And whether you use a coach, Salim, like you or like me, to help you through that sort of stuff, or whether you do it on your own, it's just a good sort of base point and say, oh yeah, I do need to look at this stuff, or, hey, I'm doing pretty good on these other things. So that's one of the things that I do as well, as far as I'm offering out to anybody listening here today. It's a nice little assessment, and it gives you back quite a lot of good information.
Simplifyingentrepreneurship.com, an assessment that's right there. Takes about 10 minutes to complete, and so it seems like a lot of value from what you described. So cool. Awesome, Pete. This was so good. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.